This meeting is being recorded.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. My name is Jen Volk. Thank you for joining us for our first Center for the Inland Bays Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee meeting for 2022. It is a beautiful Wednesday morning, chilly outside, but the sun is out. So thank you for joining us. I will just say right off the bat that I'm hoping when we have our next meeting in April, maybe we can have an in-person component. It's something that Marianne and I have been hoping for quite some time. But then, of course, Omicron hit, and the university, which is where I work, really had asked us to not have in-person meetings, at least through the end of February. But we've been given the go-ahead to have in-person meetings again starting in March. So that's something that we'll look into. We do need to have a place give us permission to have folks gather in person. So that has been one of the challenges that we're facing. So stay tuned on that. If at the very least, if we do have some sort of in-person component, I think we will still offer Zoom and try to run it as a hybrid meeting. So really appreciate everyone being here with us today. I'm going to go ahead and turn it to Marianne, who wants to introduce a new CIB staff member, and then we'll go through and do roll call and other introductions.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. We have just last week had a new staff member come on board, Caitlin Cheney. She's going to be our communications specialist, which is a super critical position in our organization, given all of the communications and outreach that we do. And she will be involved in pretty much every project that goes on and trying to learn more about it. So she's joining us today at the STAC meeting to learn more about what the STAC does. So Caitlin, if you can turn on your camera and introduce yourself, I'd like to give you that opportunity.
Sure. Hey, everybody. So I'm in my car at the moment. My name's Caitlin Cheney. Like Marianne said, I just started last week. So this is my second week, obviously, and things are going well. I'm really excited to join the center and to learn more. Unfortunately, I do have a conflict this morning, so I'm just going to be listening in for a bit, and then I'm going to have to jump off. But it's really nice to meet everyone, and I look forward to learning a lot today.
Well, nice to meet you, Caitlin. Welcome
to meet you.
Welcome to our STAC meeting, and we look forward to engaging with you more in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go do the roll call again. My name is Jen Volk. I'm with the University of Delaware Board of Extension, and I am the chair of this Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee. Doug Janik, our vice chair, I see you're here present. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
And Judy Denver, who is our secretary. Morning, Judy. And I'm going to go down the rest of the list. So our agency nominated members. We have Chris Mainon from DENREC, Division of Water. I don't see him yet.
Steve, I'm sorry, this is a ping one. Steve told me, and I was in another training this week, but Steve couldn't make it. Steve Smeller, and I'm here in for him.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Ping. What about Banu?
I'm here. Hi.
Good morning. Let's see. John Clark, Division of Fish and Wildlife. I don't think so. Carrie St. Laurent, I saw your face. Good morning. Chris Brosh with Delaware Department of Agriculture. I'm not seeing him in the list yet.
Chris isn't here, but I'm here this morning, Jen.
Oh, good morning. Hi, Aaron. Thanks for joining us.
Not a problem.
Scott Andrus from DGS, but I think Scott, Marianne, is Scott officially retired now?
He is officially retired, but he's still working. So,
yep.
You know how that goes.
And so we have Marianne. Marianne is our kind of point of contact at the Center for the Inland Bays. Good morning, Marianne.
Good morning.
Kelly Summers with EPA, Region 3.
Morning, everyone. I'm here.
Hello. And Claire Simmers with the Citizens Advisory Committee.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning, Claire. Okay, so other self-nominated members, Susie Ball, just shout out hello. Michael Bott, he's one of our newer members.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Great. Our newest member, Kristen Kowaleski, who we'll be hearing from today.
Hi.
Hello. Kathy Coyne. Ellen Dickey, Richard Dimmick, Rob Gannell, Ed Hale, Andrew Holmesy.
Here.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Jen.
Sergio Huerta. Deb JC. Deb sent a message. She has a conflict. That's right. Meeling Lee. I think Meeling also had something this morning. She messaged. George Luther. Don't see him. Tom McKenna. Holly Michael. Hassan Mirsajidi. Ram Mahan. Mark Nardi with USGS. I don't think he's on yet. Ashley Norden. Let's see, Jack Paleo. Sunita Shawalter. Roger Shepard. Robin Tyler. Bob Stenger. Lisa Wadner. We heard from AG that Ed Wariat has possibly some conflicts this morning, but he'll be popping in. Andrew Wozniak and Jordan Zimmerman. Okay, so those are the self-nominated members. So this is a good point in time to make the reminder that we're going to be putting out a call for kind of continuation of membership. So those folks who are already members, we will ask that they resubmit their CV if they intend to stay involved with the STAC. And for those of you who are here but are not actual STAC members, you're welcome to submit your CV as well and join officially on the committee. Clearly, we would like people to be able to participate. We know that there's conflicts and everyone can't attend every single time, but we appreciate everyone who is here today. So how about for folks who are not actual official STAC members, if you wouldn't mind, I don't want it to just be a free-for-all with shouting out your names, but how about you go ahead and put your name into the chat. And if, especially if your name on your little Zoom box is not clear who you are, or maybe the organization that you work for, that would be great if you could introduce yourselves in the chat. We'll try to engage the chat that way this morning. So I also want to point out regarding our membership too, that it is time for Doug, myself, and Judy to either be renominated or to be replaced as the leaders of this Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee. So we are able to renew our terms if that is what the wish is from those of you, but we will be seeking nominations. I can share if anyone's interested in possibly having an opportunity in serving as a chair or vice chair, that in addition to obviously chairing the meetings and putting agendas together, you are also responsible for kind of having a regular conversation with Marianne and helping to support other initiatives that support the Center for the Inland Bays, such as having meetings looking at the State of the Bays report, doing work on the environmental monitoring plan, those types of initiatives, plus other things. And we'll be talking today at the end of the meeting about what some of our goals should be for FY23. So those would be some of the things that you would help lead and shepherd through. So it is additional work outside of just of our quarterly STAC meetings. Additionally, the chair of the STAC is an actual official voting member of the board of directors for the CIB. So you get to interact and engage with that group as well and have some influence over that. So for example, Doug and I both participated in the strategic planning work that the board is doing right now. So it's a great opportunity to take your knowledge and expertise of what you do in your day job, as well as your passion for the Bays, represent the STAC, and then kind of share that information with a larger group of individuals who are working towards protecting the Inland Bays. So that call for nominations will be coming out. I think, Marianne, we said we would do that over email before the April meeting, if I'm correct. Yes, she's nodding. Okay, so very good. So we're moving on to other parts of our agenda today. We have some old business that we wanted to attend to. Avia is here. Avia is here. She's going to give us a wastewater update on for that new subcommittee that they've started. Avia, you ready?
You're muted.
Or I'm sorry, is this
I
supposed to?
realized that after the fact. Thank you. So anyways, I have some slides that I'm just going to share my screen to present those to you all. All right. So good morning, everyone. I am going to be giving some updates on our wastewater planning subcommittee. And I just wanted to go over our objectives and deliverables for the subcommittee, since I know that it was a new subcommittee, and I just want everyone to be reminded of what we're doing. So first, we are focusing on collecting data on nutrient loads from large wastewater discharges within the Inland Bays watershed. We're going to be developing a nutrient budget to know the loads to the Inland Bays. We're going to then relate those loads to the TMDLs, and we're going to allow the outcomes of the nutrient budget to guide recommendations for wastewater planning, wastewater treatment, and wastewater coordination in order to achieve TMDLs for the Inland Bays. Then we'll be writing a white paper with our findings and a set of recommendations, and we'll be presenting that white paper and recommendations to the center's board of directors. And then after that, we'll be strategizing funding for future work. So last month, we had our first subcommittee meeting on January 6th. So thank you again to those who are part of the subcommittee and who are able to be present. Your assistance is really greatly appreciated. And so at this meeting, our conversation primarily focused on what discharges to include and consider for the nutrient budget, and then what data is needed from these discharges. So we determined that we would include discharges from ribs, spray irrigation fields, septic systems, and biosolid application, as you can see from this visual of the nutrient budget. And again, our focus is on large systems, so a system with greater than 2,500 gallons per day for their discharge. We also think it's important to consider small septic systems, because even though the discharge from a single small septic system isn't very big in comparison to a large wastewater treatment system, just the volume and the amount of small septic systems that we have within the Inland Bays watershed could make them to be a very significant source of nutrient load. So after our initial meeting and after reviewing information from permits, because we were able to receive permit information from all large wastewater treatment facilities within the Inland Bays watershed, we have decided to go ahead and actually work on obtaining monitoring data for calculating nutrient load instead of going off of permitted discharges. The reasoning for that being the permitted discharges aren't like super consistent, and we just want to make sure that we're having like really sound science when we're performing this. And so we're going to be focusing on obtaining monitoring data to really know what is going on and what is the load, the actual load. So we're going to start with just one facility, one wastewater facility as a case study, and collect all of the required data and information for this case study. And then using that, we're going to allow that case study to drive the data collection for the remaining facilities. So that being said, our original timeline has been updated. So everyone who is a part of the subcommittee should have received that updated timeline. So now our goal is to present the white paper and the findings to the board in December of 2023. Our next meeting will be at the end of April. The date is to be determined. As far as assistance that we could use from the STAC at large, we're currently collecting information and performing research on nutrient attenuation, groundwater flow characteristics, and biogeochemical processes that should be considered in the nutrient budget. So if anyone has any suggestions or comments or resources or recommendations for us, please definitely reach out and send those along. You could either contact me or contact Michelle. So yeah, that's all the updates that I have from the wastewater subcommittee.
Thank you, Evia. Are there any questions or ideas immediately about some of the support that she needs?
This is Olivia. I have a question. I was going to type it in the chat, but Avi, are you just going to get the data from ECHO? I'm wondering why you're not just using ECHO to get the data for permitted wastewater facilities.
I was performing FOIA requests and obtaining the information from DENREC.
Okay, because it should be their permitted facilities and all the data should be on EPA's ECHO website.
Okay, I did not know that. That's wonderful. Thanks, Olivia.
Yeah, Olivia, sorry, this is Michelle just chiming in. That's, I think, the first time we've heard of that. So if we like Google ECHO EPA, will the website come up?
I would Google ECHO wastewater and it will come up.
Sweet. Awesome. Thank
And
you for that.
it's all there and you can download it, and it has not just nutrients and sediment, but all of the discharges and the permitted cap load as well as what's actually discharged. You might want to also, you had a list of the ribs and all of that, and I think you're great. It's great you're going after the septics and getting that information for the small systems. You might also want to include drinking water treatment, because I've noted that a number of those can either act as sinks or sources, and depending on where their intake pipe is, sometimes they can suck in a lot of sediment and it's a sink because then they landfill it, and sometimes it's a source because they discharge a lot of material after they treat the drinking water. So it depends on the facility. And I don't know about Delaware specific ones. Ping probably knows more, but that would be something that you might want to include as drinking water treatment. And those are also on ECHO. Nationally, it's something like the 5th largest source of sediment dischargers.
Okay.
Well, great that you're here today, Olivia. That's a great insight. I was curious, so is ECHO just what is kind of out of pipe at the end of the wastewater treatment plant for these facilities that are spray? Does that include also like the groundwater monitoring locations that they have in the field?
They have the lot long of the discharge. I don't know if that includes monitoring stations downstream. I don't think it does at all, because that part's not permitted for the facilities.
Definitely worth looking into. Thanks for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah, and ECHO used to be called ISIS, and it got renamed at some point in the last 10 years. If you remember the old name of ISIS. And I don't remember what ISIS stood for, and I don't remember what ECHO stands for either.
No, that's great.
Thank you.
So Avia, Kelly Summers on our STAC, she's our EPA rep. She may be able to help you if you need assistance in locating that information.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, Avia, I connected you with a couple of folks from EPA to participate in the subcommittee. Were they able to participate?
I believe, I can't remember who exactly was present. I don't think Carissa was present, but
was Walt?
Yes, but
okay. Yeah, I would coordinate with Walt and Ken on that, because they're definitely like obviously much more subject matter experts in that. So and if you hit any roadblocks with communicating with them, just reach out to me and I can kind of spark a return response from them.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem.
And Andrew's our resident chat data person. He's given us all the details, the website, what it stands for. So thank you, Andrew.
That's interesting. I hadn't actually seen that.
Yeah, no, I hadn't heard of it either. So we're all learning something new today. Okay, so thank you, Avia. We're going to Turn things over to Mary Ann now. Mary Ann's going to give us an update on where we are with the state of the bees.
Yeah, this is just a very brief update. Also updating timelines on this. We're looking for a probably late summer release of the report. That timeline update is driven by several things, including staff capacity, the timing of STAC and board meetings, because there are some critical check-in and approval points that have to occur from the board and from the STAC, and the timing of the meetings is a little bit strange this year. Our next meeting is actually in April, so only 2 months from now, and then we don't have another one until like late summer or fall. So we had to work around that. And then the other thing is that we're doing some contractual work with some people at the University of Maryland to revise the way that we're looking at water quality trends. We're going to be trying to do some nonlinear trend analyses that we think is pretty important, because when you look at the data, you can sometimes see definite different slopes of the lines over time. And we really want to do some different types of trend analyses. So we're going to be contracting with some researchers to do that. So that's pushing the timeline a little bit too. So Jen has sent out announcements to some key STAC members about some subcommittee meetings that we want to have to look at individual groups of indicators and provide some more detailed feedback to us. Jen, I know you've scheduled at least a couple of those. So the first one is on February 28th. That is a meeting to review the living resources indicators, and people who have expressed interest in participating in reviews of those indicators have been included in the doodle poll for that meeting. But we will send the announcements out to the entire STAC. So if anybody else is interested, you can participate in the Zoom calls, and or you can ask to see the reports to review them offline. March 7th, we have a meeting scheduled to review the watershed condition indicators and the climate indicators. I'm still trying to get some reports on the climate indicators. We have data from Dan Leathers, the state climatologist, but I have not yet been successful in getting the written reports to back up those charts. So we'll work on those. And if we have a sufficient information, we'll look at the climate indicators at that meeting. And then we had also scheduled a water quality and nutrient load indicators review session that had to be pushed because of the additional trend analyses that we're doing. So have we set a date for that, Jen?
No, Mary Ann, thanks for the reminder. I was just looking at the doodle poll, and I think we've got about a couple days that are looking like they're the best, but I think there's a few people who have not responded. So I will get a reminder out to that one and kind of just check to see who hasn't doodled yet. But it'll be that week of March 21st. So it's looking like the 21st, the 24th, or 25th. We've got three dates that are tied right now.
Okay, we'll have to look at the timeline for when we can get the trend analysis information too. So I'll check back with you on that. So the key for the STAC's role is to review the analyses that were done for each of the indicators, but also to provide some consensus on what the overall status and trends are for the different groups of indicators. And a lot of that is just best professional judgment. There are some very disparate types of indicators lumped into the chapters, and it's a little challenging to find an objective way to say the trend for this group of indicators is getting worse or getting better or hasn't changed. But we would like the STAC's consensus on that. So that will be the main focus of these subcommittee meetings, is to get that consensus and information on the trends. So I think that is it, Jen.
All right, thank you very much, Mary Ann. With no other old business, we're going to go ahead and move into our new business. I want to say thank you to everyone who is participating on this State of the Bays review meeting. So it's important work, and we'll get our agreement and concurrence with those kind of mini committees and before sharing things out with the full group and then moving that forward to the board. So thank you for helping us kind of keep this process going and work on getting this important report out.
Yeah, there will be an opportunity for the whole STAC to look at this at our April meeting as well.
Exactly. I think that'll probably be a big chunk of our April meeting agenda. So next I want to introduce Kristen Kowaleski. Kristen is our newest member. She is a resident Delawarean. She originated from the Inland Bays watershed, moved away for several years, and now she's back with her family. She's very excited to be involved with the center and to expose her children to the wonders of our beautiful Inland Bays watershed. So Kristen, thank you for joining us. We're excited to hear a little bit about you and your interests in all things nature. So thanks for sharing with us today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's okay.
Yep.
So let me share my screen and let's see here. There we go. Can you see you see the notes screen or the?
I see your full screen. We're looking at a beautiful sunset or sunrise, I'm not sure, of Reed Street at Dewey Beach.
Yeah, it's a sunset. So thank you for your time today. I'm excited to be here. Originally got involved with the Inland Bays through their children's program, which are wonderful, and curious about getting more involved because it overlapped a lot with what I was doing professionally, and reached out to Mary Ann and she put me in contact with Jen, and they invited me to join the STAC, and as part of that to spend a little time introducing myself to the group. And so I, as Jen mentioned, I'm from Rehoboth. I went to Cape and Open High School, moved back early in the pandemic, and we're settled in here and excited to be here. So after graduating from Cape, I went to the University of Delaware, graduated with my Bachelor's of Civil Engineering in 2007. While at the University of Delaware, I was on the women's rowing team, so spent a lot of time on the Christina. And so I'm familiar with some of the upstate rivers a little bit, and definitely with the bays and the, down here from growing up here. So after my time at the University of Delaware, I went to the University of Virginia, got my master's and PhD from the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department. I mentioned my time on the Christina and became pretty interested in the river side of things during undergrad. Followed that interest to the University of Virginia for my master's and PhD work, kind of honing in on the water resources side of things. I TA'd water resources engineering for 3 semesters, fluid mechanics for 2, and environmental engineering for 1. As also a graduate student mentor for the stormwater monitoring program there. And so in addition to that work, I did some master's and PhD research, and those projects centered on dam removal. And so initially my master's research project was a case study, took place in Charles City, Virginia, which is a tributary to the James River. So for that case study, there was a draining reservoir following a partial dam breach. And so I monitored the reservoir kind of as it evolved and the channel took shape. And kind of with any case study, it's one data point. And so I reviewed a bunch of other published case studies, which at the time, there weren't many, but was able to develop, to tease out some general trends and developed a conceptual evolution model for channel formation following dam removal for my master's. Continued down that dam removal pathway for my PhD. As I mentioned with the case study, it's tough. It's one data point, and you can't really control any of the parameters. And so the perk of bringing it into the lab and into the flume is you can really isolate the different components. And so I was fortunate enough to get an NSF grant to look at the sediment depositional patterns following dam removal. And so for this research, I evaluated 3 different sediment compositions 5 dam removal techniques and 2 flow types, like an average daily flow and a high flow scenario, and analyze the impact that those different parameters had on downstream depositional patterns, following the dam removal scenarios. So still like dam removal after our, 6.5 years I spent doing research on it, and wanted to do more real world dam removals as a full-time career. Did a lot of research on who was doing dam removals throughout the country, and found Interfluve in, so I said I graduated Virginia in 2013, and I started with Interfluve right after graduation, and have been there ever since. And to date, we've completed well over 100 dam removals throughout the country. And that's just kind of one piece of our portfolio of the things that we can do. We have an interdisciplinary staff of 50 people. It's kind of a combined group of engineers, geologists, fisheries biologists, geomorphologists, ecologists, and then we have illustrators, CAD designers, and then marketing and finance folks as well, kind of all working together on river and wetland restoration projects. Like that's what we do all day, every day. Habitat assessments, fish passage, habitat improvement, fluvial geomorphology, different kinds of ecology analyses, watershed hydrology, project prioritization and that sort of thing. I mentioned I'm in Rehoboth now. I originally started in our Cambridge, Massachusetts office, but we have offices throughout the country, headquartered in Hood River, Oregon, but offices in Damascotta, Maine, and Bozeman, Montana, and Minneapolis, and Wisconsin, and kind of all over the place, which is great. And so I will speak a little bit to some of my project experience, and you'll see I plugged into different offices, and that's the one really cool thing that we do is, each of the projects aren't just a team from that single office. It's, we pull folks, whoever's most applicable from the different regions. And so we can work all over the country pretty seamlessly. The one project where I'm spending the most of my time currently is the Don River. It's a waterfront revitalization effort in downtown Toronto, Ontario. Originally, this area, the project footprint was Ashbridges Bay Marsh, which was the largest wetland in the Great Lakes and one of the most extensive freshwater coastal wetlands in Eastern North America. And by 1922, they had decided that it was going to become part of an industrial and shipping hub for downtown Toronto. And so they filled in over 200 hectares of land to create these industrial sites. And so here's an aerial of what the former marsh looked like prior to restoration efforts. And so this project area is the footprint shown in red here. The lower Donlands is about 308 acres. And so in 2007, Waterfront Toronto launched an international design competition to find a landscape architect who could create kind of a new vision for this area. And so Michael von Valkenburg, who sometimes I'll say MVVA, less of a mouthful, but they won the competition, and fortunately we were brought on as a subcontractor to them and teamed on this project effort. And so our the part of the puzzle that I'm working on is the ecological components. Things like bank stabilization, using large wood materials and biodegradable fabric, different kinds of habitat installations, and then we did the channel substrate design both for the river and the wetland features. So you can see the conceptual rendering here of the new project with naturalization and rerouting of the Don River as a centerpiece of the project. If you remember in the original photo, this was all hardscape buildings throughout here. So bringing a river back to the middle, this area. So the project as a whole addresses, flood protection, infrastructure needs. It's an urban design project. There's parks and waterfront promenades and transportation. And so you have all these different folks working together on this project, and kind of coming together to really create a masterpiece, of a opportunity for both humans and animals to use this area in a way that hasn't been used since before 1922. From our side of things, our design constraints for the ecological side of things was flood capacity in a mobile channel form. So a lot of our projects, we like to have kind of the rivers and estuaries do what they want. They're naturally changing and evolving with time. But when you're in the middle of a city, you don't necessarily have those luxuries, and you need to make sure that you can and keep it where it belongs. And so that was part of the design effort here. Again, pulling in, I mentioned that it was previously a wetland, pulling in a lot of those estuary hydrology and hydraulic features, and work with the other project components, like the parks and those designs, and kind of coming up with a cohesive design was the goal. You can see the habitat communities. We did a variety of habitats throughout this footprint here, this 300 acres. It ranges from upland forests to meadow marsh, submergent marshes, thicket swamps, floodplain forests. The habitat here was really a big part of the project design. We're bringing in about 5,000 trees, 77,000 shrubs, and over 2 million new herbaceous plants, including sedges, grasses, and rushes, throughout the project, both in the channels, but then all the way through the banks of the river and the upland project area. Here is a conceptual rendering of a cross section. So you can see the river is on the, to the right of the photo, and the lake connected wetland here in the center of the photo. Along the bank of the river, you can see, the crib wall for stabilization and habitat there. And in the wetlands, what you can't see is there is a big effort to do a lot of submerged habitat wood in here, which isn't reflected in this, but it will be in the next photo. But a lot of great habitat opportunities that were not there prior to this project. And that was a big motivation on our end, was to provide a lot of great new habitat, and while staying stable and keeping a safe design in this urban environment. So here is a picture of the project from January of, it's about a month ago. We're expecting inundation on the project around 2023. So you can see right now we're working in the dry. The habitat wood elements that are in the foreground here will be ultimately underwater. And so that'll be great fish habitat with, large wood and boulders to keep it stable. And so you won't be able to see that from above, but know that they're there and available for use by all the fish. Some other elements to highlight along the left-hand side. Along the left-hand side of the photos, fabric encapsulated soil lifts. And so those will be planting, once construction's done and it thaws out a little bit, planting them with lots of different variety of plant species, and they're seeded already. And so the perk here is that this is made out of coconut core fabric, which will degrade with time, but they should last about five years or so, depending on the conditions, and that'll be enough time for the vegetation roots to take place. And so this will be a totally vegetated bank with time as it degrades, but kind of gives things a jump start for stability in the meantime. Another interesting item worth mentioning here that was really innovative is this drowned tree habitat that was installed. Right now in this photo, there's only one. We're currently up to 5. And so we brought in roughly a 40 to 50 foot long full tree, including root wad, into the center of downtown Toronto, and built using large wood, built a ballast on top of the root wad to keep it upright. We'll add a layer of substrate on top of it for additional stability, and then we'll flood the wetlands. And so it'll look almost like a drowned wetland area, but it'll have these great big trees kind of in the middle that, birds and other, nesting species can use the trees, for habitat and nesting. Is a pretty exciting and innovative approach, while the other trees on site, are still growing. So we're really excited about that. Other habitat features that still need to go in, there's going to be turtle nesting areas, osprey platforms, bat boxes, chimney swift towers, and then various nesting boxes and duck houses. So that's an exciting one. Another project that I think is pretty special is the Howland bypass that we did up in Maine. This was the last of 4 key elements of the Penobscot River restoration effort to be implemented. You can see in that picture on the right here, there's 3 dams downstream of the Howland dam, and 2 of which have been removed, and 1 there was a fish lift put in on the Milford Dam. And so this was going to be the last barrier to passage on the Penobscot. And so unfortunately, due to stakeholder constraints, we couldn't do a full dam removal at this location, and we needed to get pretty creative. We needed to leave the dam in place, maintain the impoundment levels, but wanted to provide a passive fish passage approach. So here is the photo prior to the bypass being installed, and you can see the dam, the hydropower structure itself is actually on the Piscataquis River. It is about a 21-foot hydraulic height and 570-foot span of a spillway. And so there was going to be powerhouse removal, but the remainder of the structure needed to stay in place. One really kind of thoughtful thing that we needed to do on this project was we were concerned about attraction flow and having the fish kind of stack up below the dam, and wanted to make sure that they were using the bypass instead. And so we had to be really cognizant of kind of the velocities and making sure that the fish were attracted to the bypass flow over the dam flow. I mentioned we wanted it to be kind of a low maintenance operation, passive. We didn't want somebody there that needed to maintain any lifts or anything like that. And as part of that, we needed to have stable substrate because they didn't want to have to come in after every storm and replace all of the substrate or anything like that. So the sediment sizing was really important on that one. And ultimately the goal was to provide upstream and downstream migration for multiple species such as Atlantic salmon, alewife, blueback herring, American shad, eel, and sea lamprey, and throughout various life stages. So the bypass design was 100-foot wide and 1,000 feet long bypass channel. This was pretty innovative, was the shape and the channel design. So you can see in the bottom photo, is a compound shape. So you had this lower channel on the exterior of the meander bend. One of the design criteria is that we needed to maintain 1.5 feet of water depth at all times. And so, to do that, we created a smaller channel around the exterior of the bend. We added this pool riffle structure. You can kind of see in that top photo, the pools and riffles throughout the exterior bend. And then we added a sloped overbank, outside of that low flow channel for capacity, but then also, traditionally you'll see kind of the traditional channel shape is that flat floodplain bank. And by sloping it, it allows the channel, as it rises and falls, you don't have any stranding areas. It allows it to kind of rise and fall without concerns for, you know, for passage concerns or for strandings there. Here is a photo during construction, and just so you can get get a feel for the scale of how big these boulders were that we were bringing in. You know, one tricky thing here, in which we don't have this problem in Sussex County, but we did have a lot of bedrock shown in the footprint of our bypass. And so there's blasting through bedrock, and then we needed to bring in the substrate that was sized appropriately to be stable and, you know, generate the desired hydraulics for the area. And then, you know, combined with these resting pools, you know, through the low flow channel also for fish passage and resting. And so ultimately the result was a structurally stable channel that incorporated a diverse set of river features and hydraulics, and is able to pass a variety of fish species under different flow conditions. Here's the channel activated under 450 CFS. And so you kind of see there's a big capacity in the cross section that I originally showed. This bypass, we had to design it to function over a broad range of flows, ranging from 250 CFS all the way to 12,000 CFS. So looking at this photo, you can see 450 is definitely the lower range of our design criteria, but really it can get moving through here. And this project went online in 2015 and has already had a number of large flood events move through, and it's remained stable. So we're really proud of the way that it's functioned to date.
We had a question. I was just going to say, we had a question from Doug in the chat about if there's any silting issues on the inside bank.
No, and that's because there's large, you know, I think you have like short-term silting, but when you look at the capacity of this channel and the size of material that it can move, that during any sort of flow event, it'll mobilize, you know, your sands and any of the finer materials. So any concerns that would be caused by like sediment deposition in the near term, you know, they mobilize right out of there really easily during these larger events.
Thank you.
Yep, and so here's an aerial of the completed project. Ongoing monitoring up, you know, looking at fish upstream and downstream of the bypass, monitoring of the flows and the physical channel parameters, and you know, just kind of making sure that the bypass functions as intended. And the project itself cost approximately $6.5 million on that one. And the last project I wanted to talk about that I thought would be of interest is one of our cranberry bog projects up on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. So Tidmarsh Farms, it's the largest wetland and river restoration project ever undertaken in Massachusetts, a total footprint of 225 acres. You can see the restoration boundary in that image on the left. About 50% of Beaver Dam Brook is within the footprint of the project area, and 15% of the watershed is within the project area. So we had the ability to make a really big impact on the watershed as a whole during this project effort. So here's an aerial from 1987 of the farm when it was actively being farmed. Originally, it started off as a forested swamp, and then it was flattened into a bog surface for cranberry bog farming at the turn of the 20th century. It's a typically, you know, it's a typical bog setup. You have sand dikes and dams with water control structures throughout. You know, the main trunk channel moving through the system, but then you have these perimeter drainage ditches around, the perimeter of the site. Then you also have these cross ditches every 40 to 60 feet, about 2 to 3 feet in top width there. So the issue with these farming practices is that, as you can imagine, the berms that you're putting in for access, but then also your water control structures and the dams that you're putting in throughout the site really impede free passage of wildlife, connectivity of your floodplains, and and obviously fish passage upstream. It might be interesting to note that this farm in 1989 delivered 32,000 barrels of cranberries for Ocean Spray, which is about 1% of their total crop. That's kind of a little tidbit. The thing with cranberry bog restorations to keep in mind, or things that you're trying to incorporate, are your water table depth. You want to get that interaction with the water table and your floodplain surface. Excess sand. And so the way that you farm cranberries, at the end of the season, you will flood them using these water control structures. You flood the bog, and then it freezes and you add a thin layer of sand. And then in the spring, when it melts, the sand falls on top of the bog surface. And over time, they use that as a way of preventing weeds from growing and keeping it as that monoculture of just cranberry bogs on the surface. But over time, we're saying this has been farmed for 100 years or so. So a little bit of sand each year ends up being, feet of sand by the time we're going into these restoration projects. And so, that's something to contend with, and, both for soil, and then as well as just general connectivity with your water table. You have all this excess sand. I mentioned the ditching of the channels. So the super uniform channels originally that you want to add some variability to, flow control structures, and then the uniformity of the plant species are all things that we are considering as we go into these design projects. So here's a conceptual rendering of the Tidmarsh Restoration Project. Again, you can see having a variety of habitat conditions was really important for this project. So we had areas that were designated for red maple swamp, Atlantic white cedar, open fen, upland woodlands, and just really this nice variety of habitat opportunities. As part of this project, we added riffles throughout the stream channel, which raised the water table and helped with that interaction between the surface and the water table. And then another thing that we did a lot was this microtopography grading throughout the bog surface. And, where you take the excavators and you add a lot of variability. So you don't just have one flat uniform surface, you have a variable surface. And that works to break up the cranberry mats, but then, and expose some of the underlying peat, that natural seed bank. And then other parts of this project that were really interesting, we did a really extensive planting effort, and it included, and this project also included 8 dam removals within the property. Here is a screenshot of one of our engineering drawings for this site. And I think the great thing here to see is just the channel shape. It wasn't as easy to see in the conceptual model, but you can really see the variability of the channel. And one other thing that was really interesting about this project, I mentioned it was in Massachusetts, which is cold and snowy. And, we knew that on the site, there was these areas of natural springs. And so we wanted to incorporate those and have access, design our channel to kind of access these natural springs. And so to do that, we put on a bunch of snowshoes and tromped around the site when it was snowy and saw the areas where there wasn't any snow. which indicated that, you know, the groundwater, that's a groundwater input area, as if they're, you know, it keeps the groundwaters, you know, colder in the summer for the animal or for the fish, but then warmer in the winter. And so we wanted to make sure we incorporated that into our channel design and, you know, GPSed where those springs were and made sure that our channel alignment incorporated those spring locations. So here's some photos during constriction, removing the berms, the water control structures, you know, pulling out those channel spanning dikes that were used for farm equipment access, and those 8 dam removals allowed for free movement of fish and wildlife and water throughout the project site. And yeah, so by filling in, so I don't know if I mentioned this, but we also filled in a lot of those ditches, the perimeter ditches, as well as a lot of those cross interior ditches, and adding those grade controls to bring up the water surface elevation. It really enhanced the interaction between the groundwater table, increasing soil moisture, and allowed it to establish a self-sustaining wetland area. Another project element was we added 3,000 pieces of large wood, both as, you know, channel stability features around the exterior portions of the meander bends we were creating, but also on the bog surface, just for additional habitat opportunities and roughness. And I mentioned the vegetation was a big part of this project. So originally it was a complete monoculture of cranberry bogs, and we planted over 20,000 native plant species, including over 7,000 Atlantic white cedars. So it was a really nice restoration effort for the Atlantic white cedar community as well. Working in cranberry bogs isn't always easy. So, you know, prior to starting the project, we did have ground penetrating radar flown and saw the depth of peat in some areas of the project were up to 35 feet, which is great for ecology, but it does make construction tough. So you can see here, we spent a lot of time in the beginning of the project kind of working with the contractors on you know, how they were going to go about doing the project and working with mud mats and areas to avoid. And so we chalked this day up to, we got the excavator out eventually, but it was we considered a good day for microtopography on the site. And yeah, but ultimately it was totally worth it. Construction was completed in 2016. Here's an aerial of the site. You can see Cape Cod Bay there in the background. And yeah, we're really proud of this project. It's won a number of awards, including the Gulf of Maine Visionary Award, American Council of Engineering Companies Silver Award, and the Society of Ecological Restoration Awards. But as you can imagine, with a project of this size, it really was a team effort. And it was really interesting. So the owner of the property originally was a professor at MIT and did a wonderful job of getting the MIT Media Lab really involved with the project. So there's a lot of really interesting research and you know, live cam feeds, blogs, beautiful photos, a really nice project background on livingobservatory.com if anybody's interested in learning more. I believe we've done a couple, Coonamessett and Eel River are already on Living Observatory, which are other cranberry bogs that we've done in this area. And I think there might be a couple more that they're showcasing as well. So really building out that cranberry bog research kind of body of knowledge. And yeah, this website's a wonderful resource. And there's a Instagram handle, Living Tidmarsh, if you're on Instagram, and they have really cool photos from and videos that they post periodically from the project site now that it's up and running, which is really nice to see. So with that, this is Miss Mary's biggest fan. This is my son at one of the Inland Bays family classes, and he just loves it. So I can't say enough good things. I think Mammal Mania is coming up maybe next Monday. So if anybody's available and interested, I would definitely recommend checking that out. But yeah, with that, thank you. And if there's any questions or anything, just let me know. But I'm excited to be a part of the team and excited to find interesting ways to work together moving forward.
Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, it's fun to see those types of projects and the different locations, and we really appreciate that. Are there any questions for her about any of her projects or her interest here in Delaware? So I was just curious, what was the price tag on that Toronto project? You may have said it, but I didn't hear it.
So I haven't said it. So I think right now the current estimate is 1.2 billion.
Yeah. Billion with a B.
So I think
it had to be a lot.
Yeah, I think the ecological component is in the 100 to 300 million range.
Wow.
So
pretty neat.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we're glad that you're here. We've got a question from Claire.
Hi, thank you so much. That was extremely interesting. I was just curious if you were looking at this area, where would you think that there might be a good place for any kind of a restoration project?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think, you know, I mentioned like dam removal is definitely my wheelhouse in a lot of ways. And I think that's a way that you can really get a lot of bang for your buck as far as additional habitat opportunities and access and, you know, nature heals itself really quickly, you know, surrounding dam removals in a lot of ways. And so I think that's, you know, an initial approach that I think would add a lot of value quickly for habitat. And so, yeah, so I would say, you know, looking into, and not just dam removal, but like culvert replacements, like any kind of barrier to passage that would open up additional habitat, I think would be a really good first, you know, a kind of a low hanging fruit to approach. I think a lot of the channels with the rural nature of Sussex County are ditched and straightened. So I think adding some variability to those channels, both in the wetlands and in the rivers, would be another good approach to getting things started. But you know, part of my involvement with the Inland Bays is I want to learn more too. You know, those are things that I've seen, but I know all of you guys are very plugged in and have other thoughts that, you know, I'm interested and excited about learning about too. So.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I saw the tax ditches caught your eye. I think that was kind of what I was getting with the channel straightening and stuff too. I think there's a lot of potential projects there too.
Mm-hmm. Well, Allison had also asked about what species of trees did you use in the flooded wetlands? Flooded wetlands.
Okay. So full disclosure, I am an engineer. And so, you know, our project teams, like I said, we pull in internally, we have ecologists and biologists and that sort of thing on our teams. So, so that being said, I know we were doing, you know, some willow plantings, some, you know, cedar plantings and that sort of thing. But to be honest, if you want to send me an email, I can get the full planting list and share that with you. I just don't know offhand, but I'd be happy to share that information.
Kristen, maybe you can drop your email into the chat when we're all done. So folks might not have that since you're kind of new to our group, but I really appreciate that. I'm glad we have another member of the private sector. Doug has been one of our only voices on that. We only have a handful of people. So I think it really helps diversify the STAC, having people from different areas of expertise and who apply their knowledge and expertise in different ways. So it's great to have you with us. So thank you so much for that.
I'm excited. Thank you.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and move on. Thank you, Kristen. Our next speaker is Olivia Devereaux with Devereaux Consulting. So we had reached out and asked if Olivia could come and give us a presentation about Delaware targeting and planning tool, right? DTAP. So this is similar to some of the work that she's done with the Chesapeake Bay program for being able to run nutrient scenarios, basically from the watershed loading portion of things. So we wanted Olivia to explain to us a little bit about what DTAP is, the process for building this model, some of the data sources she's using, and how it can be used. So Olivia, thank you for joining us today and getting us talking about modeling again.
Well, thanks, Jen. I appreciate that. I have to say, having watched and listened to Kristen's presentation, I'm always jealous of people who get to spend more time in the field. So, but we turn to modeling. So here, I'll walk through my presentation with you. I'm happy to go off script and answer any questions as we go along. Anything y'all need to know, I'm happy to answer and clarify. I was taking a guess at what y'all would be interested in. So talk a little bit about where we are on DTAP. We are in year 2 of development of the model. That's our second and final year. And we've talked about this. I've come to this group before, and so some of this is familiar, some of this is new because we're farther along in the project. But this part is not new. Delaware's DNREC is planning to use DTAP to identify opportunities to reach the load reductions for TMDLs, for WIPs, for PCSs, and so they can come up with a plan. It's a planning tool. It is for DNREC and will help guide those plans for TMDLs, WIPs, and PCSs. So it is only for use in the green, yellow, and blue areas. That's the non-Chesapeake Bay portion. The red areas are the Chesapeake Bay portions that drain to the Chesapeake Bay, and those are covered by CAST and CAST is used to model those areas. But for those non-Chesapeake Bay areas, a separate model was needed. So that's what we're developing. It will also have the cost of BMPs, and you can use DTAP to determine the most cost-effective BMPs, which BMPs have the greatest overall impact, which geographic area you should target. And we're doing that at the NHD scale or anything that scales up from that. And then also we'll have all the dates from 1990 through 2025, and we can examine the impact of BMPs over that time. I anticipate that DNREC will want to add future years beyond 2025. 2025 was picked because it is consistent with the Bay TMDL for the Chesapeake Bay, and there certainly will be data available after that we could borrow and use for DTAP. But that's why 2025 was picked. I know that's just a couple years away now. So the application functional design is something I wanted to just kind of review. This is not nearly as pretty as our previous speakers' pictures. Again, we're in model world now. So what the user will see is the DTAP website, and you can go to the website and you'll be able to run scenarios and do everything you want. But what happens behind that is what we've been spending all of our time developing up to now. So the user interface, the UI, will send a request for a scenario that the user has defined the parameters for. It goes to the API, application programming interface. The data are validated to make sure that they are in the proper format, units, all of that information. And sends information back if the data are invalid. It will run the request, and there's a whole scenario processor which has all of the calculations in it, the logic, and notify the user what the run status is. That triggers the load calculation, which goes into a database. We're using a PostgreSQL database, and also using Amazon Web Services cloud storage. So it goes to, all of this is stored on the web, in the cloud. And then the user gets the model results back, and that should all happen within a matter of seconds. But that's what we've been building over the last 6 months or so, and we'll continue to build and then flesh out the interface, the website. So that's the functional design. Just to take a little bit out of this and put it in a flow chart for the running scenario, what will happen is you will load the tool loads the source data, the user specifies what source data they want. That could include bringing data over from the BMP tracker that DNREC has with all of the BMPs. That includes BMPs submitted by conservation districts, DDA, DelDOT, and anyone else. There are about 20 to 30 submitters to the BMP tracker. So it'll be integrally linked, and you can pull the BMP data over for a particular year. And the other source data that would be loaded would be the average hydrologic year. That gives us our runoff factors for runoff from the land to the edge of the stream. The other data that's loaded is that year's land use. And again, we're looking at the years 1990, which is kind of the earliest TMDL, through 2025 for now. And wastewater, and loading that information. Loading the scenario data, the user specifies if they want additional BMPs or they want to remove some BMPs, they can make those changes. And then retrieving the loads, the loading rates, and then those are calculated with those BMPs. We first process the land use change BMPs, and I have a list of those that I'll walk through with you. Calculate the pounds of the pollutants in terms of a loading rate for nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment, and bacteria, multiply that out times the acres in the geographic area specified by the user. They could specify the entire area. They could specify a HUC of some size, hydrologic unit code area of some size, or a national hydrography data set, feature ID or COM ID as they used to be called. Then we process these efficiency BMPs. Efficiency BMPs are those that have a % reduction per unit implemented. And then lastly are the pound BMPs, and those get processed. Pound BMPs are those where for each unit implemented, a certain pound of nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment, or bacteria are reduced, and I'll walk through those too. And then lastly, you end up with the loads. And so we have that, and that will be stored, and then we generate the reporting data. So the user can select one of several different kinds of reports. One will be a BMP report. So it'll have a list of all the BMPs in that scenario and the amount of each BMP, like, you know, how many units. So if you have cover crops, did you have it on 100 acres, 150 acres, that kind of information. There will be another report that says what the loads are for nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment, and bacteria. And we're looking at some other reports too, but those are the two primary kinds of reports. The third report would be the base data that's used in the scenario, like the land use, pre-BMP and post-BMP, and wastewater information. So we can work out other reports, but we have those as a starting point, and then complete the run and return the reports to users so they can download those as Excel files. We'll have some graphing options available integral to the interface. And so then that run will be completed. So that's just a snapshot of the kind of the run scenario portion. But I think it captures the part that the user is most interested in. And that's the part I wanted to walk through. We have the database designed so that we have the scenario data. We've got the edge of stream load, septic load, or on-site wastewater, whatever you want to call it. The land use after the BMP. So, you know, you might think of a grass buffer that's implemented on cropland along a stream or a ditch. And so that would change the land use from cropland to unmanaged grassland. That would be the land use post BMP. The BMPs that are credited, the scenario geography, if they picked a couple of HUCs or one HUC, the list of BMPs, and the cost profile. So the cost per BMP implemented. And so that's the scenario data that's in one database. Then we have the reference data. Sometimes people like to call this lookup data. And so this will be the base condition, the scenario status, was it run or are they still editing? The report type and cost formula. We'll have a couple of different cost formulas in there. One would be an annualized cost, another one would be the total capital cost. So if your project's going to cost $1 billion, I honestly choked on my water when she said that, gave that cost for the project in Toronto. It would have the cost, the total cost for implementing and paying for it in that year. And then the unit information. And we've got the geographies. I'll go through what those geographies are specifically. And then we have these source data. There are some direct loads like the wastewater that would be a direct load. So we'll include those too. Those are in there. And so that's the database design. I realize that a lot of this is a little boring because it's kind of a computer sciencey description of what happens. And but I wanted to give you a little more detail than I've given you on the past when I've presented. This is a list of the BMPs. A list of the land uses. We are keeping this as simple as possible while still getting the job done. And I'll contrast this to CAST, the Bay Programs model. And it has right now 50 different land uses. That's a lot. I don't really know how you could manage a plan on 50 different land uses realistically. But they're all there for a reason, I'm sure, but some of those reasons have been forgotten over time, I think. But we're trying to keep it simple. So we have this fairly short list of land uses, and it includes pasture and hay. Those are hard to tell apart anyway, so that's why they're lumped together. Delaware has very little pasture anyway, so we're just calling that one category. The production area, different times, different eras, people have called this animal feeding operations or concentrated animal feeding operations, AFO, CAFO. The Bay program currently calls it feeding space because it's where the feedlots are, but I'm just calling it production area. We have the cultivated crops, so whether it's corn, beans, other, we just have one category for cultivated crops. Now that loading rate is for cultivated crops is weighted by the actual crops that were grown according to the National Agricultural Statistics Service in each particular year. So just to take an extreme example to make this clear, if there were only soybeans grown in a particular area last year, then the survey data would show that, and the loading rate would be weighted probably lower for nitrogen because it's soybeans and nitrogen wouldn't have been applied. And in another area, it might have shown that only corn was grown, in which case the loading rate would be higher. But they're both going to be in cultivated crops, but it is weighted by the actual crop that was there based on the ag census and annual surveys for crops. There's an other agricultural category for things that aren't crops and aren't pasture and hay. This would be your orchards. This would be other ag land that's not managed directly as a crop or pasture. It can include the land that is converted to grassland for a buffer, for example. For the natural categories, we have forest, harvested forest, open space, and we have water and wetlands. We're not separating the wetlands. I know that that's a kind of an issue in Delaware with some of the recent regulations, I guess the regulations that have come out, but we're just going to have one category of wetland. People have not really been able to differentiate what are called upland wetlands, which is not really even a term that makes sense because if it's upland, it's not a wetland. But nevertheless, the Bay program uses upland wetlands, so sometimes I use that too, but it doesn't make sense. But we're just going to have one category of wetland because it's not really clear how to differentiate that, and the remote sensing data doesn't really differentiate it very well. And then construction is important. That's disturbed areas. That's based on the years we have data. from DNREC. It's based on actual NOI acres, and in other years, it's just using a 3-year rolling average. And in years where there's not data going back closer to 1990 or moving forward, we're just using a linear projection or looking backwards in time. For urban, we are following the guidelines that are in the regulation. So we have commercial defined as 85% imperviousness, single family residential. Again, these are defined from the guidelines, and multifamily residential and highway. We have septics and rapid infiltration basins, and then wastewater, including industrial and municipal. And a big thanks to Ping, for who I saw was on in this meeting, for providing a lot of that data. Ping's a great data guy, so I appreciate that. Lori's also on the call, and Lori provided a whole lot of data to help support all of this. So that's also been very helpful to moving everything forward. So the geography types, for those are all the land uses, and you can have each of those land uses in every geography type or not. It could be fewer. We have options for modeling, for creating a scenario. The user, through the user interface, can select one of Delaware's 45 watersheds. We are also using the National Hydrography Data Set, version 2. The HUCs will have 12 and 8 digits. We're also going to have the 305B and 303D segments based on the Delaware integrated list. We also have counties, so you could model all of the 3 counties but only the areas that don't include the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So, that's about I'm roughly guessing, I'm not looking it up, but about 2/3 of the counties. So it's a lot of area, but again, not overlapping with the Bay program. So we're keeping it to just the non-Chesapeake Bay watershed areas. And then municipality, I have county on here twice, and then the municipalities are in there as well. So you could select those areas. So for developing the land use, I know y'all want to talk about data sources, so I thought I'd delve into this. We use the ArcGIS function and unioned the NHD and CAST modeling segments. The CAST modeling segments are land river segments, and there's a lot of data in CAST. So we union those with the 1 meter data that's available from 2013, and that's 1 meter data available from USGS land data team. People think of this as Peter Plaggett's data, is how it's informally referred to. It's not his personally, but that's how it gets referred to. So we did that union, we've got it in HD, and then we needed to be able to backcast. And to backcast, there are really only 4 categories in LCD that match well with the data from the 1 meter data, and that's natural, urban, agriculture, and other. So we use that data to backcast using NLCD, and then we proportioned the data. Well, I should go in order of these bullets. And then we calculated the change between the NLCD years for those 4 classes for each NHD catchment. And then we proportioned that 1 meter class data from 2013 to all of those other classes that we have in our model. So the proportions don't change over time, but within natural, because it's using that 2013, but the acres of natural, urban, ag, and other do change. So the acres of each land use change, but the proportion of the total of the individual components within natural, the individual components with urban do not change because we're using that 2013. And we can update that when the 2017 1 meter data is final. It is not final now. I've asked, it might be final next month, but I heard that for the last 3 months. So I'm just waiting. And so I think I pretty much said all of these about how and then we linearly interpolated moving forward in time and in between these NLCD years. And so Jen, we didn't talk about this, but I emailed you a copy of the presentation. Please make it available.
Yep,
To people.
it's on the website. Lori and I were just sharing the link, so it's
Awesome. Thanks. I saw those pop up in the chat, and so I appreciate that. So we did these steps that are on this slide, and then we needed to add in the production area and the ag open land. So the way we did this is we looked at the number and type of animals in NAS, National Agricultural Statistics Service, in the ag census. And we looked at an amount of acres per animal type. And here we're using the Bay program amount of acres per animal type. They had a very in-depth review of what the acres were. And so we did use the same amounts, and we proportioned that to the NHD catchments based on the acres of crop and pasture. Again, there's very little pasture, but so it's essentially on the acres of crop. And that's how those were put in. We added in the production area. And one of the reason we did this, and then to make room for these production area acres, we shrunk the crop and pasture to keep the total size of agriculture the same. The reason we did it this way is because we want to make sure that there's production area in every location that there are animals, and we don't want to end up with a production area where there are no animals, like in a city. You wouldn't do that. So that's one reason for doing it this way. I know there are other ways to do it, and I've talked to Alex Soroka at USGS a lot about how to do other ways with remote sensing data, and Dean Hively too. And they have ways of, they've got maps with every single poultry house on it. The pushback comes from the ag community saying that, well, a lot of those poultry houses are abandoned, and we can't say there are animals in there, and we can't say how many animals are in there. And, that's a valid point. And they also don't have anything besides poultry houses right now. They hope to get other types of animal agriculture, but they don't yet. So that's one reason we're not using the remote sensed, mapped poultry houses for the production area. I did talk to both Dean and Alex about saying, well, the biggest concern seems to come up with the fact that a lot of those poultry houses are abandoned and not currently used. Is there like a heat sensor? This is way outside of my area of expertise, but is there some sort of heat sensor that you could use in the remote sensing data to identify it? And they said that that's possible. And they were kind of, investigating ways to do that. So I leave it to them to figure that out. When they feel like they've got a robust product, we could certainly use that in another update to DTAP. But in the meantime, we're sticking with this rather old-fashioned method until they catch up with their methods. But it doesn't mean that we don't want to go there in the future. For the agricultural open land, what we've been using, and this may, we may want to look at this differently. The ag census has wild hay, and we simply looked at the ratio of wild hay to other crops in the pasture type. And the reason is that wild hay was in ag censuses through 2012. It was not in the 2017 ag census. So we just used the data from censuses leading up through 2012. In Delaware, we've looked at this, and it's only through the 1990s. And so we just use that to create the agricultural open land before BMPs are put in place. Most of the ag open land is really created by putting BMPs in place that change it to open land. So that's where we are on that one. And here's just looking at agriculture. We've got the years going along the x-axis in 1990 through 2025. And I do have CSO acres in here. There are CSOs, so we wanted to include those. They're at 0, except in parts of Newcastle. I'm just doing the whole modeling area because it would be too much to look at in a presentation to break it out in more detail. But this is the ag open land, and then it trails off in, after the 1997 ag census. It trailed off to 0, so that would just be created through BMP land use change BMPs. Cultivated crops we have going down very slightly, but holding strong, except in the CSO areas where you can see it starts to dip. The pasture and hay, it's a tiny amount in all of Delaware, considering there is a little bit of pasture hay in the CSO area. And I looked at that and I'm like, that can't be right. And I looked and looked and looked, and it actually does. That CSO area actually does include some agriculture. So we included that. The production area again was calculated, and that's just in the non-CSO areas. Let me talk a little bit about adding in the urban and natural land uses to what we already calculated. We add in construction, harvested forest, and CSO. So construction generally represents an average condition. It is not exactly from the NOI data. NOI is notice of intent to build something, to disturb the land. And so those data were available for 2007 through 2019. And we used a rolling 3-year average for those years. And when we get to the graphs, you'll see a wavy line for those years. And then it trends pretty steady going back to 1990 and pretty steady going forward after 2019. That was assuming that the length of time a site is in active construction is 2 years. So I say it's a rolling 3-year average, but it's half of year 1, all of year 2, and half of year 3 to give us 2 years. So I think I wrote that out here. And then we have harvested forest. We simply used a multiplier of 0.015 to assume that that is the amount that is harvested on an annual basis. And then CSOs are simply those that were in the CSO polygon. And here's all the urban acres. So looking at commercial, same graph with, acres on top and CSO on the bottom, because I always pull those out. You can see the commercial acres have been increasing over time. Construction, you can definitely see where we had the data for 2009 through 2019. And we saw, it's a little bumpy there, but we have the trend continuing and going backwards. Highways, smaller number of acres. Of course, these are all independent on the y-axis, but we can see that more roads are being built. As a driver, I appreciate that. Maybe not so much from a climate change perspective. Multifamily residential going up a little bit over time, and single family residential a little bit steeper slope over time. And moving on to natural, again, same thing on the x-axis, same thing on the y-axis. We've got the forest. It's been pretty steady. There's not been much change. I probably should have put numbers on the in so you could see the high and the low, but that was been pretty steady over time. Harvested forest will be steady because of the calculation method of being a set amount of total forest. So that line has the exact same slope. Open space, again, that's just what's mapped as open space, and water and wetlands. And then these are the loading rates. So here's where we have loading rates for each of the land use. And this is the pounds per acre. I should have labeled it something other than value. I apologize for that. It is pounds per acre. We have only acres through 1997. So what we will do is use that number and continue it forward. And so that'll be the loading rate. Nitrogen is green, and phosphorus is purple, and sediment is brown. The colors made sense to me somehow. I don't know. And I thought it'd be good to put them all in one graph so we could just see it all at once. And then cultivated crops have more sediment, but it's been trending down. This does include, I didn't mention this earlier, but this does include the actual air deposition. So we can see that there are some changes due from that are some reductions over time due to air deposition controls that are in place. And that's data that comes out of a national model that is used. And so with the 4 ag land uses and the loads there, this is before any BMPs are put in place. We know that with BMPs, these do come down. But we have kind of a hypothetical here of no BMPs as a starting point for modeling. These are the urban loading rates. And it does change over time, but you can see that these are the pounds per acre for these urban amounts, and then for natural. So mostly you can see the difference in water. You can see the trend that really air deposition has made in being reduced over time. But since these are just, loading rates, pounds per acre, there's not a whole lot to see here. I want to talk about the BMPs. These are the BMPs that we have, and some of these have nitrogen reduction, some have phosphorus, some have sediment, some have bacteria, some have 2 of the 4, some have 3 of the 4. It depends on the practice, but these are all of the practices. So we have ammonia emissions reduction, which happens in agriculture, pasture management, waste management systems. Again, we're talking about animal waste management systems for agriculture, agricultural erosion and sediment control on that production area, conservation plans, cover crop. We just have one category of cover crop to kind of generalize things. Ditch control is so important in Delaware. Nutrient management planning, which would be nutrient management application reduction, tillage management, forest grass buffers, land retirement. So that would be like your highly erodible lands and retiring those. Stream bank fencing, which would include putting in place a grass buffer. So you would generally do that with a grass or forest buffer. Stream restoration, there are several protocols for doing those stream restorations in terms of what's targeted. Impervious surface elimination. So you might put in place something that treats runoff from a parking lot. You might actually change a parking lot to pervious asphalt material. There are a lot of really interesting engineering solutions to dealing with impervious surfaces. Wetland creation and restoration, manure transport. So if you relocate your manure, there's going to be a reduction. Erosion and sediment control, level 2, that's a Bay program designation as level 2, but it is what is used throughout Delaware. So that's what we have. There's runoff reduction and stormwater treatment. Both of those are urban BMPs and follow the same curve methodology that is used by INCAST by the Bay program. Shoreline erosion control, which is not just adding, a hard shoreline, it would be vegetative shoreline erosion control, stream restoration projects, and then septic denitrification and pumping. I think the requirement is that pumping occur every 3 years, but there's a whole lot more that can be done with septic systems in terms of denitrification. Septic connection, which is really elimination. It's a hookup to wastewater treatment plants. Pet waste education is one that's really important for bacteria. It assumes that people are picking up after their pets. There was an article, I know, you may not be reading the Washington Post, but there was an article in the Washington Post yesterday that came out talking about the importance of picking up after your pets and the contributions that pet waste makes to runoff from land. And then slip lines, that's, treating your wastewater where you have leaky infrastructure. So those are treated by putting slip lines in place, and that's important for bacteria as well. So it's not a huge list of practices, but they're fairly general. So I think everything fits into there. The process for developing this list was to look at the various manuals for controlling pollution that are in Delaware. So we looked at a whole series of manuals. I don't have the list in front of me, but we looked at a whole series of manuals and made sure that each item that was recommended fit into one of these categories. These are the efficiency BMPs. So these are the ones, the efficiency in pound BMPs. These are the ones that have the efficiency is the % reduction. So ammonia emissions reduction, I should have fixed the slide. It's rounded, it's tiny. So it looks like 0, it's not. But you can see, like with pasture management, that, you've got a percent reduction, it would be 8.5%. I left these in fractions, so I apologize. That's probably a little confusing. And then pound reduction. So for every acre of forest buffer, you get a reduction associated with the forest buffer, but you also get an efficiency. So we call it a pound reduction BMP because you really get two types of effect. You get both the efficiency, which is listed here, and you get the pound reduction, which is not listed in this table. So that's another one. We have land use change practices. I probably should have cleaned up this slide, but I've got it for all of the ones that are changed. This is from, not farm. From land to land. I think my spell check corrected it from farm to town. It's from and to. So it goes from multifamily residential to single family residential, from highway to single family residential, from wetland creation. You could change it from what is designated as a highway to a wetland. But more typically, you would change something that is already, say, a pasture hay to a wetland or a cropland to a wetland. Those are projects that FSA and NRCS support. So those are going to be the more typical ones. And then for the bacteria modeling, it's a little different. I will say that bacteria modeling is young in general and is not as refined as one might hope. It doesn't have the decades of data to support it. However, we did pull data from Pitt and Maestre's National Stormwater Quality Database, which was updated in the International Stormwater Database. It was updated in 2020, and we've used, and some of this is also coming out of GWLFE, which Barry Evans developed, and also compared it to what's in the watershed treatment model. And so we've brought together kind of the best of what's out there. That being said, none of it's very good, but it's better than nothing. And the idea here, and I presented this to the Delaware River Basin Commission, the idea is that it's better to do something in terms of this and have some information, knowing it needs to be refined, as opposed to saying, no, let's wait for something perfect. I felt like getting something out there would be better at this point, even though it's not great. So caveats aside, we do have the land cover areas and we use the watershed data. You'll see some different source data here than you would see for nutrients and sediment, because you'll see dwelling units, population, some of the soil groups. Some of that's important for calculating the bacteria. We're really looking at E. coli runoff. A lot of the data had it in fecal coliform, so we had to convert some of that to E. coli because the older data was measured that way. The BMPs that are specific to bacteria are slip lines. The urban BMPs, runoff reduction, stormwater treatment, the septic, the pet waste education, land retirement, and impervious surface elimination and septic connections. For the sewer data, we needed to get the different SSOs, the on-site systems, the illicit connections, pet waste. And we have defaults for this, but we asked the user to input data to overwrite the defaults, because it may be that specifically have more specific information, particularly in some of the smaller communities. If you're doing if your scenario is for a smaller area, you would know a lot more than what we would have in terms of a default. So we have defaults, but the hope is that the user would be modeling a small enough area they would have more detailed information. So the first year deliverables are complete, which was the technical data analysis, a beta version of the loads processor, the requirements and design, which includes the interface design components and report mockups. And the reports look very similar to what's coming out of CAS, just not all the reports, just the base conditions, BMP, submitted data, and loads data. So that's the first year deliverables. And then the second year deliverables are due at the end of this federal fiscal year. We will have them obviously ready before that so that the DMREC can do a review. We can make changes as needed. But having the API framework that's in development, I put a check. I guess that was maybe a hope. I put checks here. These are hopeful. They're probably 2/3 of them are done. So the API framework is about 2/3 done. The front end user interface is not yet done. The data storage, it's all set up. The end user application and processing part is set up. Or using Dapper, that's working. And the logging is already in place and working. And we have the software version control, which we're already using. We will develop a user guide. I have not yet done this and conduct training sessions for users. I'm hoping we can do this in person. I'm hoping, coronavirus becomes less of a problem. I don't know what the right wording is there. And we can do it in person. If not, we can certainly do it by Zoom or whatever. You'll ask me to say something about climate change. I don't have a lot to say, except that we are running DTEP with the average hydrologic condition, and that will maintain consistency in estimates. We don't want to, the question is not what, the question we're asking is what happens with different BMPs in different locations and under an average year. So that's why we're using an average hydrologic condition. We're not saying, well, what happens with these BMPs in a wet year versus a dry year? That's not the question that this model is answering. That's why we're using one hydrologic condition and keeping it constant. So that's the goal for this, the purpose here. If the Center for Inland Bays wanted to use this for assessing changes due to hydrologic conditions, meaning different rainfall in different amounts in different time periods throughout the year. So overall rainfall changing, overall runoff changing, more flooding. We could certainly come up with different hydrologic conditions, but it's not in the DNREC scope of work. My idea for this, for just kind of from the user interface, would be that you would have a drop down and it would say, select hydrologic condition, and it would default to average, but then you could also select wetter, and we could define that, or more intense storms, or less frequent but more intensity, whatever. We would have descriptors and we could define that, the different hydrologic conditions as a kind of a drop down select list.
Said this, but what is the average period that you're looking at now for hydrologic year?
We were looking at 1990 through 2001. It's a fairly representative decade. Yeah.
Thank you.
And so I've shown you all this slide before, so I apologize for reusing it, but I think there are different people on. So this is what we have now is we've got, what's on the land, over here. We've got the practices, what happens on the land, and then what gets delivered to these edge of these streams, to the edge of these tributaries, and it's annual average loads. And that meets DNREC's needs, and that's what we've done. That's the whole design. So, we'll be done with that by the end of this federal fiscal year. Add-ons would be things like transport factors. What happens in the stream between the point where my mouse is and delivery to the bay? What are the dial fluctuations? What happens with different hydrologic inputs? Those are things that we don't have built into the model, but could. I don't have information on the transport factors, but we could add that in. There are different ways of getting that data, and we could certainly add that. And that would not be too heavy of a lift. The dial fluctuations is a little bit heavier lift. And it's certainly outside my area of expertise. So I would expect that if you wanted that added in, we would have to, and it would need to be added in to have a bay model. Then we would need to get some more information on that. So y'all were talking about HDWQ model, and it would need to have inputs. So there's no way you can have an HDWQ model without the inputs. The inputs are going to come from the land. And it's going to be what happens during the travel down these streams with those fluctuations. And that's the kind of information that would need to be generated to feed your water quality model in the bay, your hydrodynamic water quality model. So, it doesn't make sense to create this information until you have a hydrodynamic water quality model, I guess kind of mocked up in a sense, and somebody can specify what those inputs need to look like and what the data needs are, and then these could be developed. So these two things should be done, jointly, and because if we were to develop them right now, let's just say we can wave a magic wand and do it, it may not be exactly what the hydrodynamic water quality model needs. And then we'd have to end up redoing work, and there's nothing I hate more than redoing work. So I recommend that, as y'all make decisions about doing a hydrodynamic water quality model, that we hold off on these types of this type of development until you've got a little bit more detail on where you want to go with the HDWQ model. And that's all I had. I want to answer questions. Have I missed any that came in through the chat? I saw that Lori and Jen were doing a great job answering those.
Yeah, I don't think there's been any other questions, but now's a great opportunity to ask. Do folks have questions for Olivia about DTAP? There's a lot of information. I don't know if she's got a test prepared for us. No, I'm curious. So I know the center has some interest in the climate change parts of it. And I think, one of the things we could do is look at kind of the average precipitation from that 1990 to 2001 period, and then use the DNREC's climate change impact assessment report, which does modeling projections, and there's a whole data portal with that, and look at, well, maybe they're interested, it goes out to 2100. So let's go and see how different do we think, precipitation is going to be. And if we're interested in helping municipalities or areas plan for where they're going to put BMPs or other types of land use planning, maybe it is worthwhile to look at that for the long range goals. That's something we could kind of start digging into that data to see how different it is. So Andrew, sorry, I saw your hand raised and now you've put it into the chat. What's the intended scale of use for the tool?
I think we're intending it to be useful for local, what I call local TMDLs. So that's the scale. We do have it in the data in HD, but I don't think that's a useful scale for most people. So I would think it would be something like a HUT 12 or the Delaware watersheds, one of the 45 watersheds. Some of the data are fine scaled, like that 2013 land use, but some of the data are coming from larger scales, like data from the National Agricultural Statistics Service. And so that gets downscaled. Whenever you downscale, you introduce error, and that just kind of comes with the territory. But I think that those 45 watersheds are a good scale. HUT 12s are a good scale. I think those are all pretty good.
Thank you. Andrew, did you have any follow-up questions regarding that?
Well, one question, is this tool going to be mainly a DNREC thing, or is this available to pretty much the public or anybody?
It's DNREC's tool, and DNREC will control the logins and how that works. So I defer the question to DNREC, who's represented here.
Sure, I can jump in, Olivia. This is Steve Williams. It'll be open to certain practitioners, Andrew, but I'm not going to make a statement that it's going to be open to everyone and anyone. So there are some security types of things that I think that we have to work through with Olivia, just to make sure that depending upon how this is all served up, which is not my world, but I certainly know that we need to be mindful of Delaware's Department of Technology and Information and whatever securities they require in place. But again, our desire is to have this opened up to practitioners working in the field to make this a tool that others can use that are, in the industry, so to speak.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Steve, I guess if there's partners who are interested in possibly going through the training, that's something that they would reach out to you at some point. I know it's not ready yet, but maybe that's
Yeah, I'd be, Lori Brown is our coordinator, our point person for this with, she does all the contacting with Olivia and that, and she does a phenomenal job, I might add. And if, anything that you want to direct her way would be most appreciative. Thanks, Lori.
No problem.
Thank you, Steve and Lori. Mary Ann, what's your question?
Yeah, this isn't my area of expertise, so this may not be an intelligent question, but I was wondering if the hydrologic conditions that are used in this model match those that are used in the runoff models that are used to design BMPs in Delaware. I know that those were updated a number of years ago because of the changes in the hydrological conditions recently. And I see Larry Trout is on the call, so he might be able to address the DERM model.
It does not use the DERM data.
Is that important in any way? That the BMPs are modeled using different hydrologic conditions?
I don't think so, because the reductions from these BMPs are based on literature values. So I wouldn't expect them to agree, because of the way the reductions are done. They're based on, again, literature values. So I don't know. DERM must have come up. I don't know that model well. I really just know about it. And Larry probably should speak up, but I imagine that they had some literature values to support the effect of the BMPs too. Maybe Larry can say more about it.
Larry, I'm not sure if you have access to a microphone if you wanted to comment. And I see Brittany just put Chesapeake BMP efficiencies were reviewed for Durham updates.
Well, then we're using the same information. And Brittany, thanks for jumping in with that. And it's great to see you. So they use the Bay program BMP efficiencies, then we're using the same source of data. So it shouldn't make a difference.
Thank you. Any other questions for Olivia? I'm sure if Avia or Michelle, I know that they were especially interested in this, and probably will be some of the people reaching out wanting to learn how to use DTAP. So any thoughts on your mind or follow up later?
Yeah, Olivia, thanks so much for this presentation. It really captured a lot of what at least I was hoping to learn more about. And I know Chris Basin will be interested in this presentation also. So I'll be sure to share that with him because he's always wanting to know how you come up with these things. I don't have any other questions at this time. I think there might be a couple things Avia and I might want to follow up with you on, but we're pretty good at reaching out. So, but I appreciate you doing this presentation.
Yeah, anytime, and I'm here, so just reach out if you need something. So I'm happy to answer questions at any time. My contact information is on the PowerPoint, and you know how to find me anyway. So thank you all for inviting me to talk about DTAP today.
Well, thank you. I think it's really important for everyone to know it's not just some simple spreadsheet model. This is very complicated. A lot of information, a lot of work is going into it. And it's going to be a great tool for people who are managing different areas to do some scenarios and look at how their management practices could be impacting water quality. So we appreciate that, Olivia. Thank you. Have a great day. So our last portion of our agenda today is going to be some sharing from Mary Ann, and she's going to tell us a little bit about some of the efforts that the center is going through with strategic planning right now. I mentioned that at the beginning that Doug and I have been involved with that, as well as the center staff, as well as she'll share what they're planning to put into their work plan for FY23. And we thought it would be good for us to just do a little bit of brainstorming about what our goals should be going forward and the types of things that we want to and need to be working on. So Mary Ann, I'll turn things over to you.
Let's see if I can share the right screen here. Okay, so can you see my title slide there?
We actually see the slide sorter at the bottom. You're not in presentation mode on that screen. We see the previous.
Okay. It's a challenge of having multiple monitors. Which one gets shared?
Now we see it.
Did that work? Okay, yep. Great. Okay, so the reason for doing this discussion today is that this center staff are working very hard to develop our work plan for fiscal year 2023, which begins October 1st, 2022. And it's a several month process. And one of the things that EPA requires us to do is to get input from the different committees of our board. So we get input from the board itself, from our Citizens Advisory Committee, from our CCMP Implementation Committee, and also from the STAC. So we are in the process now of drafting up the work plan. We've chosen the projects that we'd like to do for fiscal year 2023. And I just wanted to go through those and allow our STAC members to have some comments, input, feedback, questions about what we're doing. And we will definitely record any of those comments and take them into consideration as we develop the work plan. So I'll provide some opportunities here, raise your hand or just jump in with any questions or comments as we go along. Okay, so I wanted to start out first by showing you a little bit about the structure of our organizations. It's a little bit complex, maybe more complex than you're aware of, just especially if you're new to the STAC. So we are governed by a board of directors, and then that board of directors has standing subcommittees that include the STAC. We also have a development committee that's focused on fundraising, an executive committee, which consists of the officers of the board and our executive director. They interact with our director, Chris Basin, on an ongoing basis. There's a finance committee of the board that focuses on our budget. We have our Citizens Advisory Committee, of which Claire Simmers, who is a STAC member, is the chair. They meet quarterly, just like the STAC does, and we gather input from the general public about our programs and provide information and outreach about what we're doing. And then a fairly new committee that was just started in the last couple of years is the CCMP Implementation Committee. So the CCMP is our comprehensive conservation and management plan that governs our activities. And Michelle is the liaison to that. And they also meet quarterly. And then we have the staff of the center. And this is the organization of the staff. So under our director, Chris, is the controller, Brittany, who handles our finances, and she has some administrative help. And then we have our science and restoration team, our development team, our outreach team, and our watershed coordination team. And under each one of those coordinators are a number of full-time, part-time, and seasonal staff. So that's how we're organized, in case you weren't aware of that. And then here's our current staff list. Put a few faces to it. Some of these people you have met through STAC meetings. They attend occasionally and sometimes provide presentations. So we have these different, these different components of our staff, the administration team, which is led by Chris, and he has administrative help, Brittany and Caitlin. Caitlin is a brand new hire. She just started this week. And we have our development team led by Anna Short. We are currently searching for an associate to work with her. She works intimately with the finance committee of the board. And then Michelle and Avia make up our watershed coordination team. We have an outreach team, outreach and education team, which provides outreach and communications about the center's work, but also manages the youth education and adult education programs. So the programs where we bring school children to James Farm, where we provide tours of the farm, we go out and give presentations to the community, answer questions from the community. So they're a very important part of our team that's involved in pretty much everything we do. And then we have our science and restoration team. Most of these people you've met through STAC meetings or perhaps by working with us. So Andrew and myself lead the team. And we have Zach, who's the science technician. He works closely with Andrew, does a lot of water quality monitoring work. Nivette Perez serves a dual role. She also works with the outreach team as the volunteer coordinator for the center, but she is a project manager within the science and restoration team as well, and she leads a lot of the citizen science programs. And then Bob Collins, who many of you know, he is our program manager. He leads a number of our living shoreline projects, also manages the James Farm Ecological Preserve. And then we have a couple of part-time guys who are our shellfish program assistants. They work with us on the Don't Chuck Your Shucks shell recycling program, our oyster gardening program, and other shellfish restoration work that we do. So that's just an introduction to who we are. And the strategic plan is a document that is put together every 3 to 4 years. We're currently working on an update to that, as Jen mentioned. So our work overall is guided by the Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan, the CCMP, that provides the big picture of how all the partners who make up the Center for the Inland Bays Management Conference, it includes DNREC, the Department of Ag, the county, representatives from the legislature, a whole host of different partners that work together to get the bays and their watershed to where we want them to be, the condition that we want them to be. The strategic plan is a document that more guides how we want our organization to grow and to function. So it addresses where we want to be as a staff, where we want to be as a board, how do we want to focus our fundraising, what kinds of projects and policy issues do we want to focus on, do outreach on to in the next 3 years to be effective in our work. And we are currently working on a plan that will cover the years 2023 through 2025. The process is being led by a consultant, Dr. Devonna Williams of Goins & Williams Associate. And she has been working over a number of months with the board and with the staff and with our partners to help us develop the strategic plan. So she's done a lot of interviews with the staff, with the board, with our partners and stakeholders. Some of you probably have been involved in those interviews. And then she is facilitating a number of meetings with the board and the staff to take all of that information that she gathered and focus it down into an actual strategic plan. The STAC has been represented in those meetings by Jen and by Doug. And we are hoping to complete those over the next few weeks. So here's the timeline, the work plan process. So we gather first input from a review of all of our different planning documents. That includes the CCMP, previous strategic plans, more specific plans like the monitoring plan that the STAC has developed, a public education and engagement plan, a habitat plan that Michelle is leading the development of. So we review all of those and pull out information that we think is relevant to this strategic planning effort and our work plan. So let's take a step back and talk about the work plan and where it fits in. So the work plan is actually our annual plan that we have to develop each spring for the work that commences the following fiscal year. It takes us about 6 months to 4 to 6 months to develop. It's a long process. We put a lot of thought into it. So for the work plan, we review all of these other documents to try to focus in on what we want to do in the coming year. And using that information, then we develop a project list for the year. We look at what projects we've completed, what are we currently working on, what new work are we interested in taking on, and can we take on given our capacity. And once we get a project list, we sit down and we develop a spreadsheet of all the hours that different staff members are going to be required to put into that so that we can help develop a budget for that. How much money are we going to need to pay for all of that staff time? Who's going to be doing each project? And how much additional money do we need for each project, for supplies, for contractual work, for travel, all of those different things. And then we take all of that information and develop the written work plan itself, which is consists of project narratives. We are very specific for each project. What are the outputs, the deliverables? What are the long-term outcomes? What are the different milestones along the way? Is it an annual project? Does it go on for several years? What are the things, the key things we want to accomplish, and when is that going to happen? And then we also have to report to EPA biannually or semi-annually, twice a year. So the work plan includes a report of what was accomplished over the last 6 months for each of our projects. And we have a number of different review points through that process. And by May, we have a final work plan and budget, and that gets sent to EPA for review. And they finally approve it before the commencement of the next fiscal year. So I wanted to just go through the different projects that we are proposing to do for the next fiscal year, and allow you to provide feedback on anything that you see that is of interest to you that you think we need to consider in developing this year's work plan. So start out by talking a little bit about the projects that we actually completed or will be completing in fiscal year 2022. So all of these projects were in the FY22 work plan. They will be completed by the end of September this year. One is the strategic plan update that I just talked about. Development team is developing a case for support. So this is a document that they can take out to donors, to foundations, to private organizations that might want to provide us financial support. So that needs updating, and that will be done by the end of the year. We have been extremely successful in raising money to support the James Farm Master Plan implementation. We had a capital campaign going on that, and we have reached our goals, so that will be completed this year. The State of the Bays report will be complete by the end of the year. SAB survey of the Bays, Andrew has completed that work that was supported by seed grant, so we now have a pretty good map of where bay grasses, submerged aquatic vegetation, is located in our bays. We are going to be doing this summer an update to our shoreline inventory, which is important for our Living Shoreline initiative. We're going to be doing it with volunteers, a combination of GIS desktop work and volunteers in boats or with drones to go out and verify the condition of the shoreline, how much hardened shoreline versus natural shoreline is left in the bays, and provide a mapping tool for that. Andrew has completed the monitoring of the first phase of his pilot oyster reef study, and he is currently working on the final report for that. So that grant program is complete. As of March this year, we will have completed 3 reforestation projects. One is in the Assawoman Wildlife Area, and another one down on Route 54 in the southern part of the watershed. That's county property. Those are being done in March, and in the fall, this past fall, we completed a partnership project with Delaware Wildlands in the Great Cypress Swamp. Michelle has completed the revision of our CCMP. That was a huge accomplishment. We've completed an economic valuation report for the bays that's under review at the moment. And Michelle is in the process of finalizing the rapid assessment project plan that identifies new restoration projects that can be done. So that was a lot of work accomplished in FY22, in addition to our ongoing projects. So most of our projects actually are ongoing, multiple year projects. Some of them are projects that only take a year or two. These are the projects that are being proposed for the outreach and education program. So we have a general program that takes in all of our general outreach, social media, update of the website, public presentations, press events, press releases, and that type of thing. That's an ongoing year-to-year project. We will, in this coming year, hopefully be able to revamp our website. It's in bad need of modernization. And hopefully we can get to that in this coming year. William Penn Foundation project is a project in partnership with PDE and other organizations to do clean water work. We have our youth education program that reaches out to schools. We have outreach on our Living Shoreline campaign. This program runs our Citizens Advisory Committee. We do events, we manage volunteers, we do public education programs around the watershed. And we have a project now that's being supported by the Pegasus Foundation, Pettis Crow Foundations to focus on terrapin education and restoration work, crab pot removals, things like that. Development program has upcoming projects for this fiscal year. Their general program, just their ongoing outreach to raise funds for the center, management of the development committee of the board. We run our annual Decked Out event. We were finally able to do that this past fall after a hiatus due to the pandemic. So that was a lot of fun, and we raised a lot of money through that event. We have twice annually appeals, fundraising appeals to raise private funds. And we are currently developing a plan to rent our facilities, which would include the office building at the Indian River Inlet and also hopefully the James Farm facility for private functions. And that would be a fundraising effort as well. In the watershed program, Watershed General takes in a lot of ongoing work, project development, grant writing, that type of thing. Avia has given us an update on the wastewater planning effort. That's going to be a big effort that will be ongoing this coming year. Sussex Conservation Partnership is a land conservation effort. Michelle or Avia, do you want to say anything about that? That's a fairly new project and a pretty important one, I think.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit because I think Michelle had to hop off. But the Sussex Conservation Partnership is a new effort, and we have two different partnerships underneath that. One is under a non-disclosure agreement, so I'm not really going to speak much to that. But the other one is the Delaware Land Protection Coalition. And we've just been having a lot of exciting developments with that, working towards increasing funding in the open space program for land conservation efforts.
Great. Route 24 outdoor recreation study, I believe, is focused on a piece of land that was purchased by the county on Herring Creek. And the intention eventually is to provide some outdoor recreation opportunities there, perhaps a kayak launch, some trails. So I'm going to be looking into that and doing some planning on that with the county. The CCMP Implementation Committee is a corresponding committee to the STAC that's focused on watershed coordination and conservation and implementation of all of the components of our management plan, tracking them and so forth. And then the watershed nutrient model is that need is largely being filled by the DTAP work that Olivia and DENREC are working on. So any comments to this point about the projects that are listed here before I go on to our science and restoration program projects? Okay. So moving on to some of the projects that may be of more interest to STAC members are the science and restoration program projects that are under my management. So we have a general program like all of the other programs at the center, and that includes management of the STAC and working with Jen and all of you on projects throughout the year. We also have management of the James Farm Ecological Preserve. Bob Collins is the preserve manager, and there's a lot of work that goes into keeping that up, making improvements there. We engage a lot of volunteers in that effort, and it's a facility that provides platform for our public education programs. The James Farm Master Plan implementation is a project to provide upgrades to the farm. There will be a new education facility, a new education campus there, new buildings. We just installed actual bathrooms to replace the porta potties there. We have a new parking area in the front, which was built a couple of years ago. That was phase one of the plan. But this current plan phase includes the education center, new trails, new signage there, new boardwalks and so forth. So we're going to be going to construction in this coming year. We're currently doing the contract bidding phase and so forth. Inland Bays Cleanup is an annual event where we recruit volunteers with boats to go out and clean up trash in Indian River and Rehoboth Bays. We're hoping to include a little bit more of an outreach component in the future. I'm not sure how much of that will be included in this year because of our capacity, but we'd eventually like to do more education associated with this on marine debris and get people involved in land-based cleanups as well as on the water cleanups. That's a vision. So we'll be moving toward that in this coming year. Hydrodynamic and water quality model is an ongoing project that we've made a little bit of progress on with STAC, but we did stall a bit over the last year on that. So that's something that STAC probably is going to want to think about in this coming year a bit more, how we can make progress on that and find funding for it. Baygrass Restoration Project, we did focus in this past year on mapping existing patches of bay grasses in the inland bays. We found primarily widgeon grass in a few locations, not a huge amount, but there is enough widgeon grass existing that we have the opportunity to collect seed from that and perhaps spread it to other parts of the bays and tributaries. And this is going to be a partnership with the DENREC Division of Watershed Stewardship. I believe that some of the current EPA wetlands grant that goes to DENREC is focused on bay grass restoration in the bays. And so it's a very important partnership that we're very proud to be part of. So we'll be doing some work this season, collecting data that can be used for suitability mapping. So things like water quality data, light penetration, bottom types, that type of thing, to determine areas where restoration of bay grasses is possible. And we're going to be focusing on widgeon grass. So we'll come up with a suitability map and then work on volunteer-based plantings where we collect seed from existing patches of widgeon grass. This past year, we got some from Little Assawoman Bay, which is where most of it is, near the impoundments, actually, freshwater impoundments that have large amounts of widgeon grass. And then we can spread those to other parts of the bays. Our migratory fish passage has been an ongoing project for a while. We have installed eelways at several dams in the watershed, and we're continuing to monitor those. In fact, we have staff out this week monitoring eels, and I have reports that the glass eels are congregating already at the base of the dams there. So we would like to install at least one other eelway in the watershed, and we looked this past year at installing one at the Gosling Mill Pond Dam, but there have been some structural issues there that have delayed any issuance of permits to construct that eelway. So we're hoping the pond itself actually was just sold and is in the hands of a landowner who is very interested in fish bypass. And we're hoping that we can continue to work with that landowner and with DNREC and permitters to see if there's a possibility of, in the future, doing an actual fish bypass at that dam. There has to be work done on the dam. It's not structurally sound. So this is something that we'd like to explore over the next year. What's the potential for that? What are some funding possibilities? Environmental monitoring is a big part of what our program does. The STAC has been very involved in creating the plan for environmental monitoring, where the focus is over the next few years. So the environmental monitoring plan, according to the plan itself, is supposed to be updated every 2 years. We updated it last year, so there may be an update to that plan coming that the STAC will need to be very much involved in. It is a plan that's developed primarily by the STAC with assistance from CIB staff. And we've made a lot of progress in implementing that plan. There are still some recommendations in the plan that need work, but there also probably have been many other new things identified that we could be working on in future years. Ongoing citizen science programs at the center include the horseshoe crab survey and tagging program, which we did a big 5-year status and trends report on this past year. We're hoping this year to get more involved in using our data to support policy around horseshoe crab harvests. And we've recently joined the Horseshoe Crab Recovery Coalition, which is a big partnership to advocate for sound policy to restore horseshoe crab populations along the entire Atlantic coast. So some of our work will be focused a little bit more on those policies in the coming year. The fish survey, fish and blue crab survey, is reaching a milestone. This past year of data collection was our 10th year of data collection, and that allows us to submit our data now to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission for consideration in their management of forage fish and their estimations of forage fish populations. So that's a big thing, and we're going to be doing a press event around that this coming summer. That's a really successful program. Engages, both of those programs engage together hundreds of volunteers each year. We have a fairly new diamondback terrapin survey. We're considering now whether that needs to be done annually, whether we can do that annually just because of our staff capacity to manage it. So that's something that's under discussion right now. Ambient water quality monitoring includes the work that we've done over the past few years to support the citizen monitoring program and get that data available online for the public. But it also includes the continuous water quality monitoring network that the center is working with UD and with other partners to establish in the bays. And we've had huge success with that over the last couple of years. We now have 4 permanent stations in that we've been collecting data over the past year or 2 from. We have support now to put in a 5th one at White Creek this spring, and we have plans to do additional stations, but that's going to be a very important set of data to evaluate more effectively the water quality of the inland bays. And we will be submitting that data to DNREC for use in their 305B, 303D assessments every 2 years. So that was a huge accomplishment that the STAC was very much involved in. We really appreciate that. Long-term salt marsh monitoring is run by Andrew. That's the sediment elevation tables at 3 sites in the inland bays. We're going to be working this coming year on doing a joint report or hopefully a peer-reviewed paper with other partners in the state who are doing sediment elevation monitoring. So that would be PDE and Carrie's group at the Estuarine Reserve. We have an ongoing annual seaweed survey program that was started by Robin Tyler back in the 90s when there were large amounts of seaweed clogging the beaches and so forth. Definitely water quality has improved to the point where we don't see those types of seaweed amounts anymore, but it is an important indicator of water quality for our bays. And then the recreational blue crab harvest was a recommendation of our environmental monitoring plan. We put together a big proposal to Sea Grant to implement that program this year. Unfortunately, we were not successful in getting that funding. So this year we are going to rethink the project a little bit and try to find other funding sources for it. Perhaps some of it can be funded through DNREC fisheries. Any comments to this point on the science programs that I've talked about?
Marianne, there was a comment by Taylor Beck, who asked if there could be a shellfish restoration component to pair with the bay grass restoration work that you have.
Yes, and I will be getting to that. That is another set of projects, and so I have a slide on that. Great question.
And I see Kelly's got her hand up, ready to ask a question.
Yeah, I have 2 points regarding the inland bays cleanup efforts. I do know, and I could talk to you offline about this, Marianne, but I believe Maryland Coastal Bays program is starting a marine debris work group with potentially a strategy of the deliverables. So there might be a way to leverage, similar communities, similar resort town issues, and see if there's a way to kind of collaborate on that. If you're looking to do a little bit more prevention and land-based strategies, which is great. I would love to help out as well. And then I'm more just curious, has the topic of microplastics or nanoplastics been discussed in-house ever with you guys, if that's something you're interested in doing to support some of your inland bays cleanups effort? And then regarding seagrasses, I can't remember if I sent Andrew McGowan, but the Chesapeake Bay put out a restoration guide in December that's I think would be very supportive of your action. So I'll make sure to send that to you and Mike Bott and Andrew McGowan, because I think some of that might help some of your programs. But yeah, that's just my comments.
Okay, great. I know that Andrew was going to be looking at some potential acoustic methods to survey bay grasses too, and I know he's been talking to you about that. In terms of the marine debris, I don't know if Lisa has coordinated with Maryland Coastal Bays. I will definitely mention this to her and let her contact you and Maryland Coastal Bays about that. She would be leading that component of the cleanup effort as the outreach program. And in terms of microplastics, we definitely are interested in that. We were very interested in the work that you and John presented at one of the previous STAC meetings and the potential of maybe involving citizen scientists in that. I don't think that's something that we as a staff have capacity in this coming year to do, but it's definitely something on our radar. And I think maybe we could discuss this a little bit more as a STAC when we get to looking at update of the environmental monitoring plan, how that might fit into those goals.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Thank you for those comments.
Definitely needs to be made a clear goal in the environmental monitoring plan. But Kelly, maybe that's something we could talk about later too, because it sounds like there might be cleanup efforts, activities that could be done. So just learning more about what those are. And I see Lisa saying she did connect with the MCBP about marine debris. They have not connected. So, but she appreciates the input.
Yeah, no problem. And if you need any help connecting, just let me know. It was a conversation that I was kind of heard in passing. So I certainly would love to see if there's ways you guys can maybe leverage your resources.
Okay, so moving on to our Living Shoreline initiative, we have a few projects under that. We continue to be involved with the Living Shoreline Committee, the statewide committee. We have a lot of outreach to promote the use of living shorelines in our watershed. We're going to be working on 2 living shoreline demonstration projects, which have already kicked off this year. Actually, Angola by the Bay started last fiscal year, but we are in the implementation phase right now. We are partnering with the Division of Parks and Recreation on a big shoreline management project on Thompson Island in the northern part of Rehoboth Bay. We are going to be developing with them, and Doug Janik is the consultant on this, to develop a management plan for the entire island, all of the shoreline areas, and then we are accumulating funding to implement at least one phase of that, hopefully starting this coming fiscal year. And we're continuing to look for funding to support the concept design that we have for living shorelines in Dewey Beach. And then we have a project to monitor and maintain the demonstration projects that we've already implemented. And then here is our shellfish enhancement program and the projects that we have under that. So we have our oyster gardening program and shell recycling programs, which are ongoing, long-standing projects. The oyster gardening program is a volunteer-based program. It took some hits during the pandemic. We lost a lot of our volunteers. We had a year where we were unsuccessful in setting larvae. So we're thinking about the future of that program. How many volunteers does it actually engage? Now that we have some oyster reefs in the water, we have a lease to house more set spats on shell to raise them up to a point where we can use them in restoration projects. We don't necessarily need the oyster gardening program to develop seed for projects. We can do that more efficiently in other ways, but we're trying to determine now whether the outreach goals and the development goals that are hit by the oyster gardening program are worth keeping it. It is a fairly time-intensive, staff-intensive program to manage. We have an oyster lease in Rehoboth Bay that we use for research and for storage of our product for seeding restoration projects. As I mentioned earlier, we completed phase 1 of the oyster reef pilot projects, which were 3 subtidal reefs that we've monitored over a few years. We have a grant awarded to establish a new subtidal reef at James Farm and an intertidal reef in Indian River Bay, but we are still awaiting permits on those. So hopefully we will get those in time to implement them by the late summer, fall. We will be engaged this coming year in development of a shellfish enhancement action plan, which is a big partnership-based plan. Many different stakeholders, state, local partners will be involved in developing an actionable plan to get more wild native oysters in the inland bays through oyster reefs, through living shorelines. We're hoping to have a plan that has actual project locations, concept designs, and a path forward in funding them. So it's going to be a big effort. We do have a grant awarded to support that planning effort, and many of you on STAC will be involved in this, so you'll be hearing about that very shortly. And then we're working with Delaware State University to do spat monitoring around the bays to get more information that will be input into that shellfish action plan. And then finally, we have a watershed reforestation initiative. We are finishing a couple of projects this spring. We don't have a lot in the pipeline. Michelle's group has been working to identify new projects that we can plant trees on. There actually is a lot of money available for tree planting right now. It's kind of a thing. So we want to take advantage of as much of that funding that we have as possible, but finding locations, people who want to switch land use of parcels of land through the watershed has been a little bit challenging, but we're working with the Conservation Partnership and others to perhaps purchase and conserve land and then do restoration on that. So we'll be developing those projects. We have 400 acres at the Wolf Neck wastewater treatment plant, which is the county is going to work with us to reforest, but they also are awaiting permits to install new irrigation infrastructure. And until those permits are issued, we can't do the reforestation plan. We have a new citizen science-based project to monitor all of our reforestation projects, which has been really exciting, and that's working very well. Zach is managing that. Okay, so any additional comments? That's pretty much a list of the projects that we have proposed for FY23. It's a lot. It's like 40 different projects in all, and it's a lot to do with a staff of only 11 full-time people. But of course, we do engage our partners and contractors and so forth to implement those.
Thank you. Okay. So are there, yeah, I was gonna say, do you have questions for us?
Yeah, so I would like to sort of turn this back over to Jen and open it up for discussion of particular goals that the STAC would like to have for the upcoming fiscal year. I put a couple of thoughts that I had here, but these are just my brain dump. It's up to you what you want to focus on.
Well, I want to hear from other people, but I definitely, I was making some notes. So I mean, obviously, I had the environmental monitoring plan that I jotted down. And I know like the hydrodynamic and water quality model, it doesn't look like a major list, but it's on mine, to kind of continue looking at economical ways that we can start to make that happen, or the finances to make that happen. But then I also saw, that you guys have a lot of monitoring and survey work that happens. And I made note that you said something about that shellfish enhancement action plan that you'll be reaching out to folks on. So it seems like those are ways for us to get involved, especially looking at maybe some of that water quality monitoring data. If Andrew's going to be the point person on that, and you'll be involved too, but if there's support from STAC that you need. So I'm curious, what other folks are thinking about, what we should be working on as a committee. Hey, Doug.
I'm good.
No, okay, I was gonna say, did you want me to do something you wanted to say?
No, it's just, I think we can re-energize some of these initiatives. At the end of the fiscal year, we started getting moving on some things, and I think it kind of, for various reasons, fizzled out a little bit. So I think we can re-energize some of the stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking at that, the impacts of dredging and water quality item there. I know we kind of got stuck with, we were asking for some help doing a literature review. The center had some funds for that, but then people changed positions and we kind of stalled.
Yep.
I guess I'm curious from other folks. Marianne, it might be good if we're, I don't know if people have their cameras turned off, but maybe if we stop sharing and if folks want to turn their cameras on, we can look at each other as if we're around a room.
Before I do that, I just wanted to show one last slide. These are the current recommendations in the monitoring plan. So as Jen mentioned, the big one, the model, we haven't made a lot of progress on. So that's definitely one that we may want to revisit. And emerging contaminants, perhaps including microplastics, is one we haven't really addressed. But these are just a few thoughts that I had for, I've been keeping a list as the years gone by of things that could be included in a monitoring plan update. We lost the atmospheric monitoring station in our watershed. The Lewis station was closed, so we actually have no atmospheric phosphorus data for the State of the Bays report anymore. So that might be something we want to look at for getting atmospheric loads of nutrients. Looking at long-term funding and data management for water quality monitoring networks that are being expanded. We think that more flow measurement stations in the watershed might lead to better load calculations. We've talked in previous STAC meetings about methods for analyzing the high frequency data that's used by DENREC in their reports. Maybe now that we have the high frequency data, we can look more at should there be different DO standards that are based on duration of DO events as well as magnitude, and benthic nutrient exchange research that might be needed for modeling. The shellfish surveys, especially recreational harvest, have not been addressed, and emerging contaminants. So it's just a few thoughts that I had.
Yeah, no, Marianne, you've done a good job of keeping a list, because I can remember hearing every single one of these things as a need or kind of a gap at some point in time in the last few years. So I think those are great points. And I think, it'll take a little bit of time and discussion too to figure out how the STAC can support filling some of those gaps. If it's just, putting it in the environmental monitoring plan and hoping a partner makes it a priority, or if there's ways for us to kind of work together to do some of that work too. So I see.
Hopefully we have many of the key partners represented on STAC. So, my hope is that the partners that are on STAC take these needs into consideration when you're developing your own work plans within your agencies or departments.
Exactly.
So I see a couple of questions in the chat too. So
yeah, I think the most recent one was from Ben. And hi, Ben. It's been a long time. Haven't seen you around in a while. So he was wondering why eelgrass was dropped out of SAV restoration.
Well, I would say it hasn't been dropped. I know that DENREC is still interested in that, and we are as well. There was essentially no eelgrass located in the inland bays. There was one like football size patch near James Farm that we were able to locate, but that was the only patch that we are aware of now. And our feeling within the center is that the water quality in the bays may not be quite yet at the point where it can support eelgrass restoration successfully. We do know that we can successfully spread more widgeon grass around the bays. It's popping up on its own in some areas where there's a seed source, and both we and DENREC feel that spreading those seeds in other parts of the bays, the water quality is sufficient to support that. It's not nearly as stringent requirements as the eelgrass. And we're also thinking about long-term, as the bays grow warmer, is there a long-term potential for survival of eelgrass in the bays? But I don't, Ben, you may want to provide some additional comments on that.
Not hearing any. So if he has other thoughts, I'm sure you can put them in the chat or unmute it at some point. I just wanted to give other folks an opportunity. Anybody else have some thoughts? Kelly, I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, in some of your living shorelines designs, I'm just curious, is SA or bay grasses included in any of those designs? Because it might be a way to kind of, again, double up some of those efforts. Something to think about.
Yeah, Doug can probably address that better than I can, but there was some attempt to restore widgeon grass in Herring Creek, or to plant widgeon grass in Herring Creek near our Angola by the Bay living shoreline. And I don't know how much of that is still remaining, but I think that's an opportunity to use our living shoreline restoration project to enhance the widgeon grass that's out there.
It could be a cool pilot just to see if the sediment accretion might help support more widgeon grass.
Yeah, for living shorelines, a lot of our living shorelines have been around marinas and developed areas. And, you know, we do get some kickback with regard to navigation during the permit process. It's a concern, put it that way. Angola, population down in Angola was not very prevalent this last year, so it took a dive. That was a seeded population. That wasn't a natural population out there. Love to do SAVs in Delaware. It's just a matter of having the right thing. In doing that, we have to go farther out into the channel to offer the protection. One of the reasons why we don't have as many SAVs in some areas is because of the energy. So, you know, that would require the structural component of a living shoreline to go farther out into the water to provide that protection, you know, from the energy. Or it could be, or if we do an SAV restoration that without any kind of structural component, then the question is it really a living shoreline or is it just an SAV restoration project? Which for me it's just, you know, I don't care how you frame it, it'd be good to do SAV restoration. It's just a matter of, you know, finding the resources and also getting the permitting people on board. It just hasn't been done much in Delaware. That's one of the big challenges. And unlike other areas where, whether it be New Jersey or other mid-Atlantic states, Delaware is, I think, is the one state that has the weakest SAV population in the basis by far. And it just hasn't been something that's been heavily targeted, unfortunately.
Thanks for raising the question, Kelly, and Doug and Marianne for your information that you shared. Other folks, other thoughts about what could be some STAC priorities looking forward in the next year or so?
Feel free to send your thoughts to Jen and me over the next few weeks or so. We're going to be finalizing the work plan by May. So I will include some of the key STAC goals in that work plan. They don't have to be particularly fleshed out, but if you have additional ideas or thoughts, feel free to email them to us or give us a call.
Yep. Other than that, we've got to the point on our agenda where it's open. Is there any other sharing or any announcements from anybody who's here with us today?
Can I have one more thing about this SAV work? That would occur subtitly, and in Delaware you have to get a lease from the state to do work in the subtitle area. So unless it's a state project, you have to pay money to have that there every year. So it's a big deterrent right now until they get the lease structure adjusted, which requires the state legislature to do that. It's a disincentive to do work in that water because it costs the restoration project has to pay every year to keep it there if it's their lease. That's the other reason.
It's an important component of partnering with the state on the effort. And I know that there is some consideration ongoing of restructuring the lease fees. I don't know what the status of that is, but it would provide more incentive for projects that provide ecological uplift.
Good point. Good consideration. Okay, well, not hearing any other or seeing other hands raised or people unmuting, I'm going to assume there's no other announcements or sharing by folks on the group. So I want to thank you for joining us today on this Wednesday. So our next STAC meeting is going to be Wednesday, April 13th. So please make sure that's on your calendar and we'll get you out an agenda, but definitely know that we'll be talking about the State of the Bays report as one of the big agenda items. So please come prepared to provide some feedback. I'm sure we'll be sharing information with you before that, so you'll have a preview and do a little bit of homework first. If nothing else, I'll say thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jen.
Thanks a lot.